G'day lads, in this video I'll explain the MLB pitcher model I built in Microsoft Excel. Here you can select an upcoming game. It'll bring in the information for that game, so the home and away team, the time of the game, the date. After you enter in the away and home team starting pitcher, it'll produce projections to the right there that matches the model generated odds to the live or pre-game odds brought in from BetMGM via a Power Query, a connection to Yahoo Sports Baseball API. It'll also bring in the game's live stats, including the live score, the line score or score per innings, player stats. You can see the player stats for the away and home team there to the right. And then below all that, the commentary of the game. So live play-by-play updates that can be brought in so that you can get the most up-to-date information using the spreadsheet. If you want to download this model, lads, so you can use it for every day and for every game, then make sure you click the first link in the description below to head to the Excel Lads Patreon, where you can also download the NBA, NHL, and NFL models I have on there. As I stated previously, it compares the models generated odds with the odds brought in directly from BetMGM, including the markets for the run line spread, money line, and totals. And to the right here, using the pitcher era stats, it also produces a predicted score line for both the home and away side. This is used in the simulations worksheet to run 2,000 simulations of the live and pre-game box score, which will produce percentages for each of the markets that can then be converted into fair odds so that you can find value if you want to pursue the strategy implemented by this model. To use the spreadsheet every day, go into the data tab and select the refresh all icon to update the list of upcoming games in E2. If I select a new game to forecast, the Angels at the Braves on the 1st of July in 2025, go back into the data tab and select the refresh all icon again. This will update the spreadsheet so that the game specific forecast, stats, and game information for the Angels at the Braves can be brought in, connect to any messages that pop up, and then depending on the speed of your computer, it may take between 30 seconds to a minute to run the queries in the background and bring the stats into the spreadsheet. So I've sped it up a bit here for the purposes of this video. When that comes in, you've got to make sure to change the home and away starting pitchers in D7 and I7. Right now, it's Singer and Fitz. This game is currently in progress, so we've got the information in row 34 below. Change the away starting pitcher to Tyler Anderson, and there'll be a drop-down list to choose from there. And then the home starting pitcher to Grant Holmes. And once you press enter, the forecasts and expected runs will update, influencing the simulations to bring in the model generated odds and compare them to the live odds being offered by BetMGM for the live game that's in progress right now. It's 0-0 at the top of the second innings. And there's commentary that updates below. So every time you press refresh all for a game, the newer starter will be brought in, the odds will update, and the player stats will update too. You can also change the odds status to pre-game, because if a game isn't in progress, then there won't be any player stats and the odds will be pre-game. And so just change the odds status in T4 to pre-game, and then it'll show the odds of what they were pre-game if the game is in progress, or if it's a game that hasn't started yet, then the odds are as of that point. Now, lads, I can run you through the process of how I built this spreadsheet. And I started in this live box score worksheet with cells W2 to Y4, the game ID, away ID, and the home ID. The Yahoo Sport API is dependent on these three cells here, X2 to Y2, X3 to Y3, and X4 to Y4, and naming them game ID, away ID, you see I'm circling them in the top left corner, and home ID. So when you're starting, just put in those three text values and name them game ID, away ID, and home ID. They represent the game, away team, and home team. Go into the Power Query editor, and you can see here I've got 14 queries, each bringing in the stats from Yahoo Sport. And a lot of these queries are dependent on the game, away, and home ID I've named here. So create a new query here in the Power Query editor, and in Advanced Editor, here's the code. So copy that code in and name the query game ID. Do the same thing for away ID, and going into the advanced editor, you can see I'm using the name away ID there, which I named in the spreadsheet, and do the same thing for the home ID. The API is dependent on the text values these yield to bring in the game specific and team specific stats. And to enable these queries to work, go into options, and in privacy, whatever it looks like here, I'm operating from a Mac, make sure to tick the box that allows data from combining sources. Otherwise, Excel will give you an error message because automatically it doesn't like combining Power Queries due to privacy issues. But of course, the Yahoo API is relatively safe to use. So here I'm on the Yahoo Sports website, and this is how I got access to the API. If you go into the MLB page and then into odds, then you can go into the games, right click on any text here, and then you're going to want to do the inspect element feature or the equivalent for the computer you're using. I'm using a Mac right now, so just follow these steps, but as I said, the equivalent of the computer you're using. And in network, you're going to want to refresh the page, and then it'll list all the public APIs free to use that this website employs to bring in the odds and show it to users. So for all the names here, I want to find the one with the Sport Graphite League odds, count equals 50, and that's here. When I click on this, I'm going to copy and paste the URL here into my Power Query editor, which I can use to bring in the upcoming games for this week, as well as the odds for those games. So if I go back into Excel, I can open up the Power Query editor again. And in here, the first two queries I have named are game odds and upcoming games. In game odds, I can go into the advanced editor, and in my blank query code, I've pasted the URL we just copied along with the rest of the code I've written. So you can pause this video and write out this code. When you press OK, it'll produce an output that looks similar to this table. However, the upcoming games and their odds will be relevant for the time you press enter on that code. Now I can do the same thing for upcoming games, except the code will be a little different below. Again, pause the video, it's with the same URL. Pause the video so you can write out the code below, and when you press OK, it'll bring in the upcoming games and the game information for the current week, including the home and away team and the game time and date. Now for the rest of the queries, I've used a different API link. Again, this is how you rename a query, right click rename. For the home roster, the URL is actually from the team stats page in Yahoo Sports. So just go to a club's team stats like the Dodgers and then right click, and then this URL would be available. And then in this code, if you pause, I've used the home ID variable I named 5 minutes ago. So that's why it's important to return a team specific roster, and that depends on the game we select. So pause the video, do the same thing for the away roster. Stat types, I've used another one yet again. This is the box score API, where I've used the game ID to return the relevant box score stats for that game. Player stats, this is again from the box score API. I'll scroll down so you can pause the video and copy in that code. If I press OK, I can move to the play-by-play information. That's from the box score URL link as well. Pause that, write it in. Live score, advanced editor. Again, that's from box score. We've got the box score stats as well. This is the runs, hits, and errors for the game, whether it's live, final, or if it's pre-game, it'll be nothing. Advanced editor again, and then I've got one more to do, which will bring in the away lineup for that game, and that's from the box score API link as well. So now that you've got all of that, it might not initially appear as a table. It'll come up maybe as an error message, but when you select close and load, it'll ask you for permission to connect. Select anonymous, press connect, and then it'll bring in the stats. And you can name these worksheets upcoming games, box score stats, odds, inning score, play-by-play for the play-by-play data. away lineup, home lineup, and that green and white table is the API data, player stats, stats for every player in the live or final game, stat types, away and home team roster, and that's it for right now. If I go back into the live box score worksheet, you may notice that when an away and home starting pitcher is selected, they'll influence the model generated odds to the right. And that's because they do. The era for each pitcher over the past year is used in the calculation for the home and away team's predicted score. If the Angels have a pitcher with a high era, their opposition will have a higher expected score, and vice versa. Now, to grab the stats for each pitcher and their era, I've brought in 3 power queries, all from the website Baseball Reference. I'll put that link in the description below. The first 2 are the pitcher stats from the team and player standard pitching table for the current season and the previous season. As this is for 2025, I've got 2 worksheets named 2025 and 2024 pitcher stats. And then this last worksheet, daily pitches, is also from Baseball Reference. And for the next couple days, it lists the games, the record for each team, and the starting or expected starting pitcher for each team. And going into the predicted pitches -today worksheet I've created, I've summarized this information in the daily pitches worksheet in a nice table, so that when you're using the model, while it doesn't come in automatically to the away and home starting pitcher cells in the live box score worksheet, you can quickly go into this worksheet, check the home and away team, and then quickly insert the home and away team pitcher. Now, these are the formulas I've used to summarize this data. You can pause the video to fill all this out yourself. I'm using a MacBook for this spreadsheet, and the Power Query will have a different output for a Windows computer, where Power Query is a much more convenient process. But as long as you summarize the data from columns I through to L like I have, then that's all that matters. Next, in column O is the original pitcher list, where you're going to take a unique list of all the players listed in the Baseball Reference player standard pitching table, and then return that in O2. You'll notice some players have a dash next to their name. I want to remove that in the column immediately to the right called pitcher name, and I'll use the formula above to do that. Next, from columns Q through to U, I've got the current season and the previous season's era and games, and then in column U, I've got the final calculated era. Here, I'm using a threshold of 20 games. So if a player has played more than 20 games in the current season, here 2025, then that player's final calculated era in column U, which will be used calculating the predicted score for each team in the model, is going to be entirely dependent on that current season stats. However, because the threshold is 20 games, if a player has played only 10 games in 2025, then half of their data will be made up from the 2025 season, 10 out of 20, with the other 10 out of 20 share, 50%, being from the previous season. So going into the live box score, if I go into the list of pitchers drop-down list, that's going to be from the P2 array of pitcher names we just calculated. Now, moving over to the right here, you can see that I've used an XLOOKUP function to return each player's era data in U7 and U8, with an if error function to return nothing if the player doesn't have an era or if no pitcher has been selected. Next, I can go into the city drop-down list and select a different city to show the updated game information. So I film these videos out of Sydney, Australia, and so we're a day in front of America. So as a result, if I select Sydney, refresh all so that the model updates, then once that's finished, I can select a new game, again, refresh all, bring in the Angels at the Braves live stats again. Now they're up to the 4th innings and the score is still 0-0. But you can see the time and the date of the game has updated to 9:15 in the morning on the 2nd of July. And how I've done that is I've created a worksheet called time query, where I use a Power Query connected to a website in the description below to bring in the time zones and the difference from Sydney. In column K, I've calculated those formulas so that when a new city is selected, you can get updated game information. Now, if I go into the cell with the drop-down list for the city in T2 to U2, if I go into the data tab and data validation, the list for that is going to be the array in F2 for the time query worksheet, the list of cities there, so that you can select a city. Now, next up, I'm going to go into the upcoming games worksheet. And this is the Power Query with the date, time, status, and teams for every game over the next few days, brought in from the Yahoo Sport API. And here I've got a few columns that adjust these values. So here I've got the selected time and date, where I combine the time and date to make it neat. So in columns S and T beside it, I can find the date and time separate from each other, and these are adjusted for the time zone. In column U, I've got the upcoming game with time, which is what is in the drop-down list in the live box score when selecting the games, the game ID, home and away score, the status, the away team, home team, and their IDs, as well as the day. Now, as you can see, all of these are from the upcoming games Power Query to the left. And so that's how that data is brought in. If I now go into the play-by-play worksheet, this will be the play-by-play Power Query connection, as illustrated by the play_by_play in front of the column name, which we're returning. And here in F2, I've got this big formula that spills an array, which grabs the stat for each separate commentary or each separate update that's listed in the output to the left. And so when I press enter on that, the play number, type, period, player's picture, and all the relevant information is matched to the name in the column beforehand. Now, to the right of that, from column AI across, I've got to summarize this data, because right now it's in the form of a player code and then the text, whereas I need to replace that code here, mlb.p.60214, with the player name. And sometimes there's more than one of these brackets, meaning there's more than one player involved in the update for the play-by-play commentary. And these players are brought into the spreadsheet through the connection to the away_roster and home_roster connections. And of course, these are found in the away team roster and home team roster worksheets, where these connections are found. So going back into the spreadsheet, I can go across and just do 5 players. And so the formula will be the same thing every second column through to column AT. So for the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth bracket potential player, if there's not a fifth bracket, then it'll be blank, and so on up to first. I've got the text here using this let and lambda function, excluding any words with a square bracket here. And when I press enter on that, it updates the square brackets by removing them and then adding back in the text of the player mentioned. So I've also got the innings there matched by using the let function to find when that update happened, so that when I go back into the live box score worksheet with the play-by-play updates, I've got my commentary and innings here. This is the formula in B50 for the innings, using that array function in play-by-play AV2 to spill the innings in descending order so that the newest update is first. And then for the commentary in cell C50 spilling down, I've got the text of the update from the array AU2 in the play-by-play worksheet. Now to center this, I've selected cells C50 to Q50, right click, format cells alignment, and the horizontal alignment has to be centered across the selection. So that's how you can enter the formula into one cell and then have it centered over the 10 or so columns to make it look good. And then I've also got conditional formatting over the top of that, which I'll show you how to do when we calculate the player stats for both teams now. So for the player stats, I can go into the away lineup worksheet as well as the home lineup worksheet. It'll be the same thing. I've got the player, class, order, position, and then to the right all the way to column AC, the list of stats the Yahoo API brings in. For column G and G2, I'm using the away lineup connection to the left immediately there to match the player ID to the player using the away roster connection. And then I'm just using a simple X lookup to get the class, order, and position. Now I've got this long formula to find the at-bat stats, which is using the player stats connection, stat type 2. And so I've got two mentions of the stat type in this formula, and that's using the player stats worksheet where I've got the stat type and the stat value. So here, if you check stat 2 name equals MLB stat type 2, and then below that the same thing. For runs, it's going to be stat type 3. Again, replace any instance of 2 with 3 here in the speech marks. Hits is going to be stat type 4, as you can see there very clearly again. RBIs, stat type 8, and then going across, I'll just announce the stats for you to type in: 7, 12, 14, 17, 53, 23, 139, 111, 113, 114, 118, 121, 115, 141, and 140. Now the pitcher has the pitching stats there. Tyler Anderson so far in this game hasn't batted, so he hasn't got any stats there, and that's totally the same for the batters. They haven't got any pitching stats, so that's left blank as well. Now the home lineup worksheet will be exactly the same. To the left there is the home underscore lineup connection from the blank query code we created in the Power Query editor, and we're matching the player ID in column A using the home underscore roster connection to return the player name. And then using the home lineup there, I'll list the class, order, and position. And then of course, using the same exact stat types in the same exact order, I'll go all the way across to the pitching stats at the end of column AC. So now we're able to get the individual player stats for every match. In order to make our predictions for the predicted scoreline, we need the team stats. And to do that, I've got the current season's team rankings data here, 2025, and I've got 5 tables. Each team's runs per game, each team's runs per game conceded, each team's number of games so far this season. Next is each team's runs per game per extra innings. So the number of extra innings runs scored divided by the number of games played, and then the same stat but conceded. And then in AY and AZ, team rankings names are compared to the Yahoo API connections team names so that we can use an XLOOKUP function to match both these up. I'll put the link in the description to all 5 team rankings data sets. In the attack and defense ratings worksheet, I've got 32 teams, their team names, and then using the team rankings data, the runs per game, the runs against per game, runs per innings, which is subtracting the extra innings runs per game from the runs per game. So we get runs per 9 innings when dividing that by 9. And then the attack rating is the runs per innings divided by the average runs per innings across the league. So if a team has an attack rating of above 1, they score more runs per innings than the average team, and vice versa if below. Of course, you want a low defense rating, so you concede as little runs per innings compared to the average team as possible, and of course a high attack rating. So this table here from column A to H is for the current season, 2025. And below that, we've got a home advantage defined. That's going to be 3%, and the average pitcher era in 2024 is about 4.1, so just leave that as 4.1. Now to the right of that, from columns J through to Q, it's the exact same thing, but for the previous season. So in this case, 2024. And again, same formulas, but in the team rankings data set, it has both the current season and a previous season column. So you've just got to reference that previous season column in this calculation. We're going to use all these stats in the final table to the right here, from column S onwards, in calculating the final attack and defense ratings for each team. And similarly to calculating the final era for a pitcher, the threshold here is going to be 30 games. So if a team has played more than 30 games in the current season, their entire attack and defense ratings will be dependent on their current season's results. And that'll be scaled if under 30 games. So if they've played 10 games this season, then 10 out of 30, 1/3 of their stats will be made up of this season's results, and the remaining 20 out of 30 share, 2/3 will be made up of the previous season, 2024 stats. And so now we get attack and defense ratings for each team, and the average of that should be very close to equaling 1. Going back into the live box score worksheet now, the list for the upcoming games will be in E2, and to confirm that's from the upcoming games worksheet, I'll show you how to do that in the data tab. In data validation, the source for the list is going to be the array in U2, which is the upcoming games with time or day. So when I press OK, we'll be able to choose any game from that list, and the game chosen here will be searched with an XLOOKUP function, and we will return the away team in column Z here within the same worksheet, the time in column T, the home team in column AB, and the date in column S. Of course, the home and away starting pitcher is the list of pitchers. We went through that. The away side and home side in cells B9 and I9 are listed, and again an XLOOKUP function is used looking up the game and then the score. Now for the line score, we've got this HStack formula to list the number of innings played, as well as combining that with the runs, hits and errors, and that's from the live score connection. Now for cell C16, which is the Angels score, we can go into the inning score, which is in the inning score worksheet. And this is then transformed into a connections worksheet we'll build, which is within this formula here after the choose columns function. And what the connections worksheet does is combine the box score stats with the inning score, so that when the data updates, we can just take both stats from here, combine the away runs for every innings for both teams, and then attach the runs, hits and errors for both sides to the right of that using the horizontal stack or HStack formula. And the box score stats is where the runs, hits and errors are from. Going back into the live box score worksheet, I'll review how I built the formula to bring in the model generated odds and compare it to the live odds from BetMGM for the market on the left there. So the model generated odds, you'll notice how they change even when I don't change anything else when I update the worksheet. And that's because they're based off of simulations, 2000 to be exact. And here in the simulations worksheet, we'll simulate one single game, live and pre-game, and then depending on what odds we choose, that'll be done 2,000 separate times to get a distribution of the results. And then we can use formulas like sum product to find the probability by counting the number of times the market was met, or the success rate, and then dividing by the number of trials, which is 2,000. So this is all based off the predicted score for both teams in cells U10 and U11, and this is using stats from the attack and defense ratings. So if you pause the video, this is the formula for the home and away team. So the Braves, being the home team, have a approximately 1 run advantage over the Angels, and as a result, they should have a higher chance of winning. Now, we can't just use a regular probability distribution like Poisson or binomial to simulate these outcomes, because baseball runs come all at once when they do come. So using the formulas here, I'm going to create a section called probability distribution. Write in the values for M, N, P, B to calculate away C and home C in B7 and B8. And then B11 and B12 would be the away and home predicted expected runs. To get the cumulative probability, after you've listed runs 0 through to 20 in column G, this will be the formula for the home side. It'll be 1 minus B8 times the sum product function. And then below that, we'll write another formula using the variables M, N, P, B, home C, home predicted runs. And then we're actually able to drag down cell E5 all the way down to E23. And it's the same thing in column F. We've got the formula for F4, a separate one for F5, and then you can drag F5 down to row 23. Now, as I said earlier, we're simulating two different things: the regular time simulated box score, so using the predicted expected runs for both teams at the start of a match to get their probabilities for the run line spread, over under totals, and money line, and get those probabilities. We can use an XLOOKUP function in B27 and B28 to find their probability of scoring runs 0 through to 20 in a single innings and drag that across to column J. In J28 for the home side, if the sum of the runs for the opposite team is less than what they've already scored, then leave it blank or 0, because then the game ends. If not, they play another innings. Now, in this situation, the runs are tied 2-all after regular time, and then 3 or 4 more innings rather are played until the 13th inning, where in this model the Braves scored 9 runs to end it. Now, in a real game, it would just be a single run and then it's done, or however many runs they score at that point in time, a maximum of 4. But this model simulates full innings to simplify it slightly. Now, the live simulated box score is the same thing, but it takes the innings that have already been played and makes it equal to the score of those innings. So if the score is currently 0-all, it's 0 for all the innings that have been played so far, and then the rest of the innings are simulated from that point on. And of course, because it's 0-all, we drag that out to column Z. Because it's 0-all, the total market will be less as a result, because there's less opportunity to score runs than when it's 0-0 at the start of a game. Now, depending if the odds chosen are pre-game or live, these results will go in B2 and C2 for both teams, and then a data table will be performed. So I'll delete that and show you how to do it now. When I delete that, all the equivalent or model generated odds are thrown out now. To do it, select the cells across columns A, B, and C from A2 down to C2001, skip the row input cell, and for the column input cell in what if analysis, just put a random cell outside of the data set, and then the model will update with 2000 simulated results for that game, so that when we go into the live box score, the model generated odds are simply the number of simulations where that market is met, the criteria for that market is met, and divided by the number of trials. So that's why when we change it for every separate batch of 2000 simulations, 2000 is really not too much. But the problem is if you put too much simulations in this spreadsheet, Excel will take too long to load. So you've got to find that balance between the speed of the spreadsheet and reducing variance as much as possible. Now, the chance percentage column with the formulas I just went through are the portion of the simulations where that market succeeded, and the equivalent odds are reflected by the odds chosen in T3 of the live box score worksheet. So if I change it to decimal odds, then for Australian users of the spreadsheet, they can see what the decimal odds will be. Changing it back to American, and of course the model generated odds will go back into an American format using the formula pictured in the cell. Going back into simulations, the chance percentage fluctuates as well. Again, this is just due to the variance of 2000 simulations due to the law of large numbers. If we increase that to 2 million simulations, then the variance will be greatly reduced and it wouldn't bounce around by a couple percentage points here or there with every separate batch of 2000 simulations. Now, going back into the live box score worksheet, I can use a let function to summarize the odds for the 3 different markets brought in by BetMGM within the Yahoo Sport API. So make sure you take a photo or pause the video to write down the formula in M6. That's an array function, so it'll spill the results through to P11. Now, the formula for the player stats is a filter function where we get the players and then their stats from the stats worksheet. If the status of the game is pre-game, then it'll show up as nothing because there's been no player stats yet, and the Yahoo Sport API doesn't bring in predicted lineups, only lineups for people who have played or if the game has started. Now, I've got a nice formatting for this, and going into conditional formatting, this is my rule to highlight every second row or every even row in gray, and then to put a border around those rows and make it bold where there is player in the row. So that's why you see the headers are in bold, and I can do the same thing to the right for the home side, the Braves. Now, just to make sure this works for an upcoming game, which hasn't started yet, it's got a status of pre-game in O2. When I refresh the data set by selecting the refresh all icon in the data tab, the line score, the player stats, and the play-by-play commentary becomes blank, and initially so do the odds. But to change the odds status from live to pre-game, use the drop-down list in T4, select pre-game, and then the model generated odds will be matched with the pre-game odds for BetMGM. So if you were using this strategy, you could identify which markets had any potential value. So that's how you use the model, lads. If you want to download this, then again, click the first link in the description below so that you can use it for every day of the season. The last thing we have to do for this game is to change the pitches, and you can do that using the predicted pitches worksheet for upcoming games, or you can research it yourself if it's a game a couple days in the future. So for the away side, Sonny Gray's starting, and then it's going to be Mitch Keller for the Pirates. And when you press enter, the model generated odds will update. So there's not too much value for the run line spread or the money line there. However, there is some value in the under 8 runs for the totals. Thanks for watching, lads. Let me know in the comments what video you want to see next.